Welcome back into the TribPreps video series. We are here with our Week 2 football review. A pretty fun night across the prep football landscape here in the Cooley region. Some interesting games like we talked about on our preview, some matchups that you don't see too often. We were able to go out to some places that we don't get to go too often. Get to go to Caledonia's season opener against Red Wing. I was down in Westby for a great game against Sparta, or between Sparta and Westby. Alex got to go over to Cashion, so we aren't able to hit Cashion all too often, but some fun stuff. So let's just jump right into the scores before we get to the games we want to talk about. We mentioned Caledonia. The nation's longest win streak in high school football continues. Caledonia beat Red Wing 55-7, so the win streak is at 55 games now. That's appropriate, 55-55.
Yeah.
Sparta beats Westby 35-25. Onalaska Luther beat Cashion 21-14. Greenwood held off for Roqua 28-14. Auburndale beat Blair Taylor 52-14. DeSoto beat Riverdale 28-0. Toma beat Black River Falls 48-14. Logan beat Eau Claire North 26-20 up at Carson Park. Onalaska, which we're probably going to start off with, beat River Falls 28-21. That's a big game for the Hilltoppers. West Salem got back on the winning track here, 26-14 over Ellsworth. Bangor shut out Loyal 41-0. That's 2 games in a row with a shutout for the Cardinals. And then Prairie du Chien takes down Waterloo 46-19. All right, so like I mentioned, we got to start with Onalaska. A huge game for the Hilltoppers, taking on another Big Rivers Conference team like they did last week against Hudson. 28-21 victory for them. Close game throughout all of it. Excuse me. River Falls takes the lead early on, 7-0. Goes to halftime 14-14. 21-21 going in the fourth, and then Onalaska scores in the last few minutes a 38-yard touchdown pass to Connor Haggerty. Todd, you've been around the Onalaska program for a long time. Early in the season, I know it's kind of tough to gauge how much these wins mean, but to go back-to-back 2 Big Rivers teams and get nail-biting wins like this where you really rely on their defense to come up with some of these big stops, I mean, this is not the Onalaska we're all kind of used to.
No, they're really challenging themselves with the schedule, non-conference schedule this year. We'll see another installment of that next week going to Lake Mills. I think Lake Mills has had a very good team recently, and I think that'll be the case. They couldn't hang with Menominee, but not a lot of teams do, and that was in week 1. But I think this is a great step forward. You talked about it being close without. I think Onalaska's been in a close game since the opening kickoff for the season.
Right.
We're only through 2 weeks, but I don't know if they've ever been in a game. I think both games have been within 7 points all the way through, which has kind of been trading touchdowns. So they haven't had a big deficit and haven't built a big lead yet. So we'll see what happens next week. But this, again, we've talked about it a couple of times on here. It's a great win for the team, and they're certainly going to be ready for the MVC, I would say, when we start week 4 with the teams that they're playing.
Absolutely. A couple quick things to mention about Onalaska. We have the stats in front of us here. Austin Larson, 12 of 17 with 4 touchdowns and 202 yards. He actually put up 57 yards rushing too, which he's not the fastest guy, but was able to get some things going with his legs, which is big, especially when that team's hurting a little bit on the offensive line. So they're young guys figuring it out. So if he's adding some rushing yards with scrambling or maybe some design runs, that's going to help loosen some things up, you would imagine.
And he last year he seemed to be pretty good the times I saw him of knowing when to go.
Yep.
And when to just kind of eat the ball and go down. So obviously we're seeing some continuation of that.
Big receiving night for Landon Peterson, 5 catches, 102 yards, and 3 touchdowns. We know about his speed. We know he's a guy that's going to consistently be one of the fastest receivers that they play. And he had a big touchdown last week against Hudson, so I'm not surprised that he was able to break off some big ones. His long was 38 yards for him as well. So 20 yards a catch for him. So not too surprising, but just a nice night for him.
Great athlete. I can't remember who they were playing last year. I know it was at one game where he had some trouble with some catchable passes and wasn't able to bring him in. And I think we're going to see a different Landon Peterson this season. We're already starting to see that now. And I think that'll just kind of continue to grow. I think he's going to be put in a much bigger position. And he showed in different sports that he can jump up there and do that stuff if they need him to. So.
Absolutely. So let's move over to Caledonia. That's the game you were at tonight, Todd. We mentioned a nation's longest win streak here in high school football. kind of it's almost kind of dismissive to say, but ho hum, Caledonia win 55-7. That's what it looks like on paper. But then when you really delve into it, this is Red Wing. This is a 4A program going against a 2A program,
Yes.
and it looked like it was the other way around. It looks like Caledonia was the 4A program, and just really put the beat down on them.
And just because you're 4A doesn't mean you're the better team, but when you're drawing from a bigger pool of kids and a much bigger school, it's a big deal for Caledonia to go out and win this game, especially the way it did. I don't think it really matters where each program is. If you're a 2A beating a 4A, that's a good thing. And it was just typical Caledonia. I mean, I think one of the things that we saw tonight, and I don't know if it's the first time because I know he did well in the playoffs last year, but man, Eli King is, I'm not sure the word to describe him tonight. Had a couple of touchdown catches early, had an amazing punt return, 52-yard punt return for a touchdown, in I think the second quarter of the game too, where he was going full steam, 100% at a ball on the ground and just scooped it up and kept going, no adjustment or anything after picking up the ball. And Brad King said that's because he has always spent his life running away from Owen and Noah, and he had to grab things along the way to make sure he still had them. That's what he said on the sideline. But it was an amazing play, and the offense goes out, scores 55. Red Wing did score, and it was a tip ball. We thought it was going to get intercepted. It was a throw into the end zone. Ball got tipped around and fell onto the receiver, so they got a touchdown out of that. But of course, Caledonia wasn't happy about that. Giving them touchdowns at all. They don't like giving them touchdowns at all there. But very impressive performance, especially in week one. And Noah King made good decisions all night. And that connection with Eli, they scored on the first two possessions. Noah to Eli on some nice plays. One, Eli made a long run, 20, 25 yards after catching it, and then Noah hit him on the first possession near the goal line on a post, and you can just tell those two are so comfortable together. And Noah also ran for a touchdown later in the game. He threw 3, ran for 1, 6 completions, 185 yards. So they were going downfield.
Yeah, exactly. So you mentioned that punt return, some big things from Eli King. Would you say that punt return was the biggest highlight from the Caledonia game tonight?
Yeah, I think so. And stupid me was talking on the sideline at the time and kind of keeping an eye on the game since it was a punt. And I don't have video of it, but I wish I did because he was coming right at me. But it was amazing because he just kind of picked it up, made one guy miss, cut to his right, and there was a huge lane that just opened up, and he came all the way across the field and took it in for the touchdown. And really was an amazing individual play in that game.
For sure. So, like I mentioned, it feels dismissive to be like, oh yeah, that's just what Caledonia does. But like, can you put a little perspective on just how Caledonia is challenging themselves in some of these non-conference games now, where maybe in the past they didn't have to because the way Minnesota is set up, like you're going to have that playoff shot and you don't have to worry about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, they're playing some different teams this season. Red Wings in addition, and again, 4A school, good win. They're going to play Rochester Lords midway through the season, which has won 2 state championships in the last 3 years at a higher level, 3A. So I think a lot of people are looking forward to that game. They're anticipating another good game with Chatfield. Chatfield's kind of the team in the conference that's been able to say, we got a shot.
Yeah, they had them down last year. What was it, 20-0?
Yeah, and Chatfield won tonight, but barely. They beat PEM by 2 points and had to stop a 2-point conversion at the end.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know. I don't know much about PEM, but I would think Chatfield would have won that game a little more handily if they're talking about challenging Caledonia.
Yeah.
But that's what Caledonia is saying too. So, so those games come, and I think they're back-to-back games too. And Chatfield's coming to Caledonia, I think, for homecoming. So there's some games that people can really circle on Caledonia's schedule this year, where usually it's wait till the playoffs and then we'll go see them and see what they're doing. But there are a couple of regular season games that I think people want to stop in and watch, especially that one against Lords up in Rochester.
Yeah, that Lords game is going to be pretty sweet.
Yeah.
I want to jump over to the Sparta Westby game. I was at that one tonight. First off, just awesome atmosphere at Westby. They had a couple of years, but they didn't have lights at their stadium. Had to play afternoon games, a little bit different feel. Tonight was a great night, perfect weather, a lot of people just surrounding the field. Stands aren't huge there, but everybody's surrounding the field. Treated to a great game. Sparta goes up 28-13 right at the beginning of the third quarter, and it kind of felt like Westby was a little bit out of gas. Defense wasn't going to be able to keep up with how Sparta was scoring. But then Austin Mowry, their senior running back, takes the next kickoff, 85 yards for a touchdown. Defense gets a stop. Punt return gets them down to the 19-yard line of Sparta. They score 3 plays later on another Mowry touchdown. So all of a sudden, in 4 minutes, it's a 3-point game, and Sparta's the one that's kind of on the ropes again. But then Cole Wisniewski, who had a phenomenal game again, 4 touchdowns for him, he steps up. As the field flips, it's 3rd and 11 at the 40-yard line. They're trying to go deep on a pass. Nothing's there. He scrambles, gets the edge, and it's just a dead sprint down the sideline. Nobody touches him. That ends up being the play of the game. Sparta wins 35-25. But this is one of those games where it was just so back and forth, and when both offenses were right and kind of had their stuff rolling, it didn't look like the other defense had any chance stopping them. But then anytime there was a penalty, which there were quite a few tonight, or a mistake on the outside, or somebody falls down, they had one play Westby did where the guy gets a pitch and just kind of slipped. It would have been a big gain play, but just one mistake here or there for both sides kind of determined it, and then Sparta going over the top with Wisniewski having those big plays. It was just a fun one to watch from all angles.
How do you think Coach Hulse feels over in Westby after 2 weeks? They're 0-2,
right?
But 2 close games. 2
close games, 2 super physical games when he has a lot of new guys rotating in on the lines and different positions around the field. They're feeling really good, actually, because you look at Darlington. You mentioned they lost to them in week 1. That's a powerhouse program year in, year out. Sparta's almost getting to that physical nature of anytime you play a Sparta team right now or the last couple of years, it's a physical fight. And Westby was up to that challenge, was in the game the whole time, never really gave up, never kind of wilted to that physical challenge. So I think they're looking at it as we hung with these teams. Now we're in this new conference. We get conference play going next week. They host Arcadia. So I think we're going to see a big performance from Westby next week because they had these disappointments, but knowing that they have the talent, they've got some things going, especially with Mowry. I mean, that kid, he's 160 pounds, 5'10", but he runs like he's twice that size. He is running guys over. He's running through people. And you're not always expecting that with the guy with his speed. He could try to make people miss more, but he's definitely not afraid of contact.
And some adversity in the backfield for Sparta tonight that they overcame.
Right.
That
was the thing that I think it's going to be about, or my Sunday story is going to be about, is that so Sparta starts the game with Nick Kent at running back. He had a 56-yard touchdown run on their first possession, so he's looking great.
And over 100 yards last week. So.
Yeah, and 100 yards last week. He ends up hurting his hip on that touchdown run. I don't know how, because if he got hurt, then just ran the extra 40 yards because he got, there was some contact near the line, but then it was pretty much a wide open sprint. But he gets hurt on that play, and then in comes Marcus Cox, a junior who they play mostly on the defensive line. He's their backup running back, and he ends up playing pretty much every play of the game outside of special teams from that point on in the middle of the first quarter, and has 202 yards on 28 carries. He ends up getting vultured for a touchdown from Wisniewski on an option play. It was one of those oh man, you got to get this guy a touchdown, how well he's playing. But just a phenomenal game out of him. And it was funny, you walk up to him after the game, talk with the coaches, make sure you can talk to him. I walked up to him and all his friends were circling him like, oh man, you're actually going to get talked to. It's like, well, yeah, he had 200 yards, he had a phenomenal game. So talking to him, nice kid and everything like that. Just, I think the thing that kind of surprised him was just how dedicated Westby was at stopping Wisniewski on the veer, getting outside, trying to limit some of those big plays. That a lot of times he would get through the whole 4 or 5 yards and it was one-on-one with the linebacker. So if he was able to make him miss or get through him, then he had really big gains right there. So huge game out of Marcus Cox, and just a big showing from Sparta offense the first 2 weeks. 105 points through 2 weeks. I mean, obviously last week against Black River Falls, that's a struggling program, but just to put up these numbers and against teams that, against a Westby team that's got some good players and good coaches there. So I think it's a good sign for Sparta. Maybe they're going to be a little bit more in that contention for the MVC than we earlier predicted. I'm a lot more sold on Wisniewski as a passer than I was last year. the way that he was able to throw the ball downfield today. So I think my biggest highlight would be probably the Wisniewski to define the definitive touchdown run at the end or in the fourth quarter, put him up by 10. Just once he got the corner, there was probably 2 or 3 guys that could have gotten an angle, but he just outran him. So it was just a great play out of him. And the biggest thing I learned just from a Westby side, 0-2 is tough to start the year, but I think we're going to see maybe like a Sparta season from last season out of them, where it starts rough, have a couple of tough losses, but that builds you up for your conference season, and you kind of run through it from there.
And that's saying something too for Westby, considering we weren't really sure what they're going to be like.
Yeah, when you lose a guy like Ryan Danes, like
exactly.
with so much of your
They
offense,
lost most of their team.
Most of them outside of the player of the year.
They only
here,
had a
for God's
handful of
sake.
guys coming back that were part of that deep playoff run last year. So
Yeah. Right.
it's good to see that they're on the right track already, and we're only in week 2.
Right.
And Marcus Cox too. That's a guy that when I was out there in Sparta before the season, Cole Wisniewski brought him up on his own. Marcus Cox being that guy. So it's good to see that now Sparta seems to have the depth around Wisniewski, because that was once again a major question mark at the end of the season. Can Sparta surround Wisniewski with talent? And they have Nick Kent. Hopefully he's okay. He had 100 yards last week and
Sure.
big time run this week. And a guy like Marcus Cox comes in off the bench, 200 yards.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty good.
Yeah,
in Sparta.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Had to mention from Westby, Devontae Spears had an interception. Didn't get into the offensive flow so much, and I think part of it was because whenever he would line up outside, they would throw Wisniewski on him, and that's a tough matchup.
Mm-hmm.
Just size, strength, and speed can keep up with a guy like Spears, but and is so much bigger from a height and weight standpoint. But had an interception, had a big punt return, like I mentioned earlier, that set the Westby offense up in the red zone, and then had a deep touchdown or deep reception that got him down to the 5-yard line in the fourth quarter. So a solid game out of him, especially with some adverse circumstances, having to go against one of the best athletes in the area on the outside. So a lot of good stuff on both sides. So that's what we'll see in our Sunday piece on that game. Make sure you're on lacrossetribune.com for all the videos, like we were mentioning, all the game stories that we were at tonight. 5 of them in total. So a lot of stuff from lacrossetribune.com right now that you can check out from the prep football scene. Want to jump over for your game, Alex? Onalaska Luther takes down Cash, excuse me, 21-14. Saw your video. Luther seals the deal with an interception. Just what were some of the big things that you took away from a Luther team that you come into the season you're just not super sure about and is able to take care of business?
Yeah, I think I was really surprised with Luther's defense, how well they played. They had 3 takeaways, 3 sacks as well. Taking away the ball, really setting up, because I think their offense still needs some time to, find their footing a little bit. You could tell that too. I don't think they maybe had over 200 yards tonight. It wasn't a whole lot, but that defense really put them in great position, whether it be a short field. I mean, they scored 14 of 21 points off of turnovers tonight, and I think that was kind of the biggest thing. I was really impressed with Brandon Statler too, their safety, and also running back they have. He had a nice interception where, he's playing his own coverage there, read the quarterback's eyes, and made the play and showed really good hands doing it. And also, he had the first touchdown as well, where he just took the pitch from Wilhelm there, the quarterback, and also was off to the races, made a juke cut back inside that made 2 guys miss, and it was really impressive. That pitch too really set up the rest of the game for the Luther offense. When they get the outside going, they have those sweeps plays and the pitches and stuff like that. Then that opens up a guy like Eric Rogers can come in and hammer away for 5-6 yards right there in the middle, and they're able to melt a lot of clock there in the second half doing that. But I was also impressed, Cashton, they were able to connect a few times. Austin Slipbaker was really impressive at a 79-yard score where the one, he was a low throw, caught about the shoe tops and took off, and I was surprised he made it to the end zone because I thought Luther had the angle and he just kept going. And 79 yards, he also had a 21-yard later where he used his body to shield out the defender. So that's a name to keep an eye on out there in Cashton because they have a good one there. And I think Cashton's starting to build something after going 0-9 last year. You can see the numbers are back up this year as well, and they have a sophomore quarterback there, Wall, who looks like he's going to be doing some good things as his future moves on here. But for me, it was just Luther kind of really taking control of that defense, whether it was their secondary or the front line, getting those sacks and getting the penetration was the difference tonight.
Did Stadler get hurt in that game and come back in too?
Yes, he had. He told me it was cramps. It looked like a Charlie horse, but he told me it was cramps. So he was good. There's been a lot of cramping these first 2 weeks of the season.
Usually is, yeah.
Yep, and there usually is, and he had to. That's what he said too. It just kind of getting back in the game flow of things, and he's a good kid too. Talking to him, and Luther, they were just fired up to get a win. It was a rough year for him last year, and you could
been
tell.
rough several years.
Yeah, exactly, it has, and they're. It's good to see because next week they start their new conference on the Swall, and Matt Schaubel, the coach, really preached how important it was to get a non-conference victory as they head into kind of uncharted territories a little bit. Of course, they have Mineral Point coming up Friday, who is very good, very good.
Yeah.
Which so it might be a little bit tough for Luther, but I think this is start in the right direction for them.
Absolutely. One last thing to mention, Logan gets a nice win over Eau Claire North on the road at Carson Park. They avoid a Hail Mary-ish type play about 35-40 yards away from the end zone. Pass goes up. They're able to tip it down to seal the win there for the Rangers. So they're 1-1 now heading into next week. But like I mentioned before, everything that you heard us talk about is going to be on lacrossetribune.com. Lots of videos with player interviews, highlights, coach interviews as well. And then make sure you're checking back on Saturday afternoon and Sunday for some follow-up stuff from these games and more. So lacrossetribune.com for all of that. For Todd Sommerfeldt, this is Alex VandenHouten, Colten Bartholomew. Thank you for watching.